Hello and welcome to the Varietal Show. If you've never been here before, my name is Rory, and this is Varietal Literature's YouTube channel where we just basically do stuff that we do stuff to do with narrative. And specifically, this is our Thursday night show where we do a write-along stream. What exactly is a write-along stream? A write-along stream is where we... I'm gonna move my camera down just a bit here. That's better. A write-along stream is where we play kind of a game together where we get random prompts and then we try to make a story out of it. If you're here for example, our Fireside Fairy Tales, like you're here for folklore content, we do that Tuesday nights. And there's a whole playlist of it called Fireside Fairy Tales, of which there's like 100 and something videos in it or something like that. Crazy. You know, if this isn't your thing, you can try that out. But if this is your thing, and I do think you should give it a shot, there's a couple of ways you can enjoy this. You can join us in the live chat if you're here live and give recommendations and help us write this story about a lightsaber. I'll explain how all that works in a second. Or you can just write your own version off the same prompts that we come up with and put that in the comments if you're not watching it live, or just keep it to yourself if you want to. It's a write-along stream. We sort of enjoy each other's company and write together. If you want to skip all the talking and just get to whatever story we create or anything else that you want to skip ahead to, down in the description below there will be timestamps. If you're not watching this live, you can go ahead and skip ahead to whatever interests you the most. Hello, Jenna, and hello, GS, already lighting up the chat, and May the 4th be with you. If you don't know, May the 4th is Star Wars Day because it's a pun. May the 4th be with you. And for that reason, we're going to do a game that I am going to explain right now. Where is... This part of the show is called Lit Games. It is the core of the show where we all write together. Lit Game stands for literature games, but it also basically we do like solo tabletop RPGs, which is what I'm calling this, though technically it's not that. Expressive game, lyric games, whatever else. And we just play them and try to write some sort of first draft or start of a story in about an hour. We usually get a whole story done, like a short first draft of a little story or a vignette. Sometimes we don't. I don't think this will be one of the nights where we get the whole story done. We are playing a game that involves 6 parts, and that's why I don't think we'll get through it all, but that's okay. We'll get as far as we get. So I'm going to explain the game now. If you are completely disinterested in that, I will remind you that down in the description below, if you're not watching this live, there will be timestamps. You can skip ahead, go straight to the writing part. The game we're going to play here is called Sword Saga, a one-player storytelling game, and that is a more accurate description of what it is. Because we're not really going to take on a role here. We're going to tell sort of lore about a sword based off prompts. So it's not complicated, really. I'll just show you. It has 6 scenes. Each scene is like a little vignette that's about something. So the first scene obviously is going to be about when it is forged and created. And then on each scene in the game, as you can see on the screen here, there are what are called D6 rolling tables. For those who are not intense, weird nerds like me, this is just a dice, is probably what normal people would call it, but we call it a D6 because it is a 6-sided dice, D standing for dice. We're just going to roll this, get a prompt off it 3 times each scene, although the third is a bit optional. And then we'll write a little vignette about that aspect of the sword's life, starting with its introduction, but then also the first time it like kills something and whatever else. And by the end of it, we should have some lore about a legendary blade. Now, the game is not keyed towards Star Wars, but given that it is May the 4th, and given that I have spent the last week playing Jedi Survivor instead of sleeping, it's the thing on my mind. And Jedi Survivor has this core element of like where you get to take pieces from around the world and build your own lightsaber. And like the lightsabers are 90% of Star Wars. You can come at me with the charming characters. They have great characters, frankly, in Star Wars. And the sort of fun of like, you're a wizard, Harry, but you're a space wizard in this case. But it's about the light swords. It's about lightsabers. So we're going to sort of tell a story about that. That's it. We'll see how many scenes we get through. I'm gonna not lean too heavily into the lore. But I do have to lean into it a little bit. So, for those of you who don't really know anything about Star Wars, Star Wars because of how it was created has like 9 different canons at any given time. Like a lot of hay was made out of the fact that when Disney bought Star Wars, they threw out a bunch of the expanded universe stuff, which was a bunch of books that frankly weren't very coherent with each other. And a lot of that is just because of the nature of how Star Wars stuff got written. Like it was sort of like someone had a cool story idea and they would introduce some elements to tell that story, but then they weren't really a part of a group that wanted to make a larger world like a Silmarillion or something. And so what happens is you get a lot of contradictory stuff, and then there's certain canons that people take as more canon than others, and anyways, for that reason, I'm not too worried about that. But there is some things that are consistent, and when it comes to the lightsaber, the most consistent thing is the Kyber crystal. So the Kyber crystal is just a crystal that has a lot of force power. Like, there's more to it than that, and I'm sure some Star Wars fan is probably crawling in his skin about the lack of details there. But for the average person here that's going to help me write a story, the Kyber crystal is this crystal that, depending on the canon you're looking at, comes from certain planets only, or specifically, or there's main seams for it, whatever else. Anyways, when you're a young Jedi and you're learning, a part of that learning process is eventually build your own lightsaber by getting your own Kyber crystal. Now, the Kyber crystals are interesting because they are sort of these semi-sentient crystals that when you kind of attune to them, they change color. That is supposed to be somehow reflective of your character or the kind of person you are. And I think that's interesting. I will go for world lore that helps build out character. But that's not really going to work too well here, because the assumption of this game is that the sword changes hands. However, the first person to make it is the one that determines the color. So that's the first thing we have to do. Is the reason I'm telling you all this is the first thing we have to do, the first vignette, is going to be a young Padawan. Maybe you have to be a Jedi Knight to make your own saber. I can't remember if it's the last thing you do or the first, because obviously you have to train with it. But we have to have our person who initially made it. So that's something we need to think about, what their name is, whatever else. One thing I do want to add, though, that I think is a very cool piece of lore that you may not know, is if a person turns to the dark side, becomes a Sith, like Darth Vader did, often they started as a Jedi. And the Kyber crystals are considered traditionally aligned to good, I believe. And so in order to force it, pun intended, I suppose, to serve your will as an evil Sith, you have to dominate the crystal will and sort of warp it. And in doing that, in dominating it in a sort of meditative, angry state, it can crack the crystal. But more specifically, it bleeds the crystal in that the crystal turns red. So canonically, sort of, there's inconsistencies in this. Lightsabers with Sith are almost always red And the guy behind me here, Kylo Ren, famously has these two vents that makes like a cross guard, but it hums. And that's because in his process of bleeding it cracked and it's sort of malfunctioning. So bleeding a crystal is really cool, I think, because it sort of reinstates the themes of like domination and power over nature rather than harmony with it, which is supposed to be what the Jedi are. And this is the theme. I like world building that helps story and character. I do not care about faff. That's just adding complexity for no real literary artistic merit, which is a popular thing in sci-fi, to just add, you know, there's 10 different currencies and they look like I'm not into that. So I am interested in these aspects of world building. So that's all I'm going to say about canon lightsaber stuff. It starts with retrieving a crystal and mounting it into a metal casing, usually, that has a power source that they then, it turns a color reflective of their person. So the classic intro here will be, I think it's in Jedi Fallen Order, the other game that I'm playing the sequel to. It was a frozen world. That's the only real representation I've ever seen of the world where you get kyber crystals, so we'll say ours is a frozen world too. So what we're doing then is we're just writing lore about these notable events in the history of a specific lightsaber. And we're going to use the game Sword Saga, and we're going to roll d6s. And let's do that now. I have here 3 d6s. Let's see what results we get. GS says a moodstone. You are correct. It does sort of operate on the same logic as a moodstone. But to me, that's interesting because, like, that gives me insights to the character, right? Which is what I want from world building. Okay, number 1. It is a large, heavy weapon. Heavy is going to be hard to do with a lightsaber. In the Jedi Survivor, they do sort of have this heavy version of a lightsaber that you can, I mean, spoiler alert, but it's in the ads, that he carries around like it's a heavy old claymore or something like this, or a longsword or a greatsword. And like, it's cool aesthetically, but the whole time I was like, this is still a light sword. Why would it weigh different? I'm sure somebody has some canon reason why. The next one is a 4. It was created for a child to train them for future danger. Wow, that is 100% the Star Wars universe. GS says light as in like light diet food or something. Saber. And then our last one is a 5, and this is the optional plot hook. The person who made it was famous, not for weapon making. I don't like that plot hook, so I'm going to re-roll it. There's a prophecy about this weapon. Sure. Prophecy's a thing in Star Wars. Okay. Let me get a drink of water here. Now there is this thing to like Genesis, please can we have a massive lightsaber greatsword that's a pastel pink? Maybe the crystal was just a real honker. That is a thing. There are bigger crystals. And yes, of course we can have a pastel pink. Just sort of trying to get a picture in my head of like what the opening scene is. If this was a movie, I would sort of like open with the somebody climbing an ice wall and whatever else. The thing about that is it's visually interesting. Literary is not very interesting. So I'm going to start a little closer to the action with. Oh yeah, I need a name. I think we'll deal. It'll be made by a female coded person. So, I mean, I need a Star Wars name. There must be a Star Wars name generator. I didn't even think to look at this. Star Wars name generator. 100% this exists. I don't know, but I know. Star Wars name generator. There it is. Lorne Pellis. Female names. I'll give you sort of like what I think are the best three, and then we'll decide together. Amaj Shift. Celerakil. And Sila Baze, rather. We'll call that 1, 2, and 3. Vote now. Give you a minute. Throat's a little dry today, so I'm gonna drink some more water. I think we'll make like a massive sort of pink greatsword, and then we'll think a little bit about what kind of prophecies are on it. We got 2 votes for Sila. Okay, so Sila Baze. And I'm going to write this like classic genre sci-fi. Not like usually, I don't think anybody in the audience ever really picks up on this, but there are styles of writing. I can do multiple styles, but for the most part, I tend towards a more literary style, because that is the books I liked reading. But we're going to do a little more young adulty here, because I think it suits the genre. So Sila Blaze swept the frost, the frosting sweat from her brow. And squinted back down the ice wall she had just traversed. It was a treacherous climb, but it was made nearly impossible by the sharp gales of icy wind. GS says, you've done many distinct styles and we notice and appreciate. Well, thank you. I think I generally style when I do sort of on like maybe a little bit on characterization and stuff, not actual sentence structure, and I think that's what I mean. You know. Anyways. Genre fiction's a little less poetic and a little more focused on being straightforward. Okay. Her training. They all trained on Coruscant, right? As if anybody in the chat even knows or cares. I'm sure people who watch it later might, but her training on... I know they at least trained on Coruscant, so we're going to include it. Her training on Coruscant was rigorous, but never in such terrible weather. She shook off a shiver and pulled her pale white hair back over her, let's say, horns. I'm going to do a little bit of weirdness here. I don't know if there's a horned human creature in Star Wars, but I feel like there must be. Jenna says, I think so. It's been a hot minute since I have avidly consumed Star Wars media. I mean, Coruscant is obviously one temple of training since, you know, Darth Vader did, let's say, some practice there. I've always found it strange that those movies wanted me to feel like he was a tragic, relatable character. And I feel like it's hard to come back from, you know, just massacring unarmed children. Like, I think we're supposed to feel a little conflicted in the end, you know? And I didn't. And it does kind of undercut his later redemption as the, like, I don't know. Anyways, they're fun movies. I don't care. And pulled her pale white hair back over her horns. She was young, so they were mere nubs. By the way, if somebody is a Star Wars fan and they know a species that has, like, horns, but otherwise it's fairly humanoid, feel free to let me know in the chat. Jenna says, listen, they were banking on, oh no, he's hot for people to sympathize. I don't know that that's what George Lucas was banking on in that scene. But I will say that as a person who has played a lot of D&D, if I want to throw people off, I just have to make them hot. Like, I could have the person cackle every time. He'd be like, just go around the corner. But if the picture is hot, they'll be like, oh, yeah, I could trust this guy. And then they'll write, like, fan fiction about him for a week, and then the next week when he betrays them, they'll be like, never saw it coming. She was young, so they were mere nubs. But they picked up on the chill, like biting into ice. So much for starting close to the action. She rubbed her temples for the headache that brought. To assuage the to help the headache it brought. I am thinking of her with a sort of more caramel complexion, but we'll see if I remember to mention that. She rubbed her temples to help the headache it brought. She was unprepared for the cave ahead. Her training would easily surmount the trials that protected the Kyberian. I have no idea if that's even a fair word in here. Protected the Kyberian seems down low in the caverns. But the beauty and scope of a place, of a temple so powerful in the Force overwhelmed her and distracted her. She failed to notice the door in front of her once and bounced her face off an old steel, I don't want to say door again, but portal? Sure. Any traits you guys think she should have would be cool as well. But also, we need to be thinking about what the prophecy of the blade would be, because that was one of our prompts. It's going to be a big, heavy pink blade. I think I know how she's going to find it, but what's the prophecy of it? In other words, like, what vision might she have about it? Or keep in mind that the blade likely doesn't stay with the person the whole time. She slipped down a whole flight. Sure. Down a whole flight of steps carved from the marble. And granite stones. You know what I can do, by the way? I just remembered, I have a space playlist. Let's put on my space playlist. We don't have to keep it on if it doesn't, like, suit the vibe, but... this reminds me of that game. We need to play that game again. I made this for the the space exploration solo tabletop RPG that I did called Alone in Space or something, I think it's called. I 100% want to play that again. That and Weeds in the Waste are my two favorite games I've played so far. Lots of people loving the little nubbin horns. What color are they? She has caramel skin. She's got white hair. What color should her little nubbins be? She slipped down a whole flight of steps carved from the marble and granite stones. Not long after the door. She was just too enraptured by the arcing, carved stone of the old Jedi temple that stood guard over the Kyberian over the Kyberian, thank you. No, it doesn't want to say Kyberian. It wants to say Liberian. Over the Kyberian seam. That's very biblical of you, GS. GS says prophecy, 12 tribes will be created if it meets the green Viridian stone. I like that. I will use that. Jenna says maybe it's a blade that's used to help heal an ecosystem. I think her nubbins should be a warm dark gray or a dusty red. Ooh, dusty red is good. I like dusty red. Over the Kyberian seam. It was perhaps the doing of the Force itself, then, that she failed to notice when she stepped off the edge of stepped off an edge and fell for what felt like an eternity, well past the curated path set up by the old masters, with wind roaring in her ears. She cried out, Oh my god, the Peanut Gallery, the official name for the chat, has done research and says Zabrak are near human species in the Star Wars canon, but do they have horns? Let me look this up. Zabrak. Star Wars. Oh, they do. Oh, it's Darth Maul. Oh, cool. Well done. Zabrak will work. With when roaring it in her ear. I don't think I've ever known them to be called that. She cried out in panic. Whatever ledge she hit now would surely kill her. She recalled her training, stayed her scream, and focused her trust in the Force. GS says 12 Tribes provides the opportunity to many sequels. Yes, I'm sure this fanfic will get made. So confident I am, I've built in sequels and world building. Cinematic universe options. The walls, so strongly woven, the presence of the Force by way of its rich kyber crystals drew her in. Until her trembling hand ran down stone. She was falling so fast into the dark. But when she felt the stone when she focused her mind on the wind and the stone, stitched as it were to her by way of the Force, by the Force, she suddenly slowed. For D&D people, she cast Featherfall. She suddenly slowed, coming to a harsh stop on a ledge somewhere deep below the planet crust. But alive. Her leg was surely broken. Yet she still felt relief. The Force had given her a second chance. I don't know. was her name again? Scylla. Scylla passed out. When she awoke, she saw the largest kyber crystal. Wait. I know. She heard a voice, a chorus, really, that said what she would make Scylla, by your works will this blade be true. Turn the tars to groves, and by 12 tribes make one. Should it find the Viridian Stone. She startled awake and saw before her the largest kyber crystal she had ever seen. Pale and colorless, big as her fist. That might be a bit much. Big as her palm. She knew that the voice must have come from it. She rested her hand upon it and felt a warmth, and was filled with a warmth that turned the crystal vibrant pink. With this crystal, in the time that she spent healing her leg and surviving on the plants and waters of that strange, deep place, she built... Oh, we need a name for it, don't we? Oh, if you're wondering why I'm not checking in so much, is obviously this isn't the most interesting part, so I'm trying to get this out. She built the She built Glimmer, a broad and fierce lightsaber. A broad and fierce lightsaber that had extended matched her in height? Sure. In height. And could only be controlled by a two-hand grip. It was said it hummed so beautifully one would mistake it for an all-drawn royal choir. GS says because it was double-bladed. I haven't imagined it double-bladed. I've imagined it like a great sword. I mean, if canon Star Wars stuff doesn't explain itself. Why should I? Okay, so I think we've covered all our prompts, right? Which means we need to do our next prompt. It was Sila, the Darth Maul has a double lightsaber. When I was a kid, I had the Darth Maul double lightsaber. Jenna says, I'm picturing Cloud's Buster Sword. I should have put Cloud's art up. Oh, I just noticed Jenna asked, this might be a rabbit hole, but why is Windu's lightsaber purple when most are blue and green? I don't know what the canon answer is to that. But here's the actual answer. Samuel L. Jackson said, my lightsaber is purple. Or I'm not doing it. He wanted a purple lightsaber. That's the main reason. I'm just looking for that species again. Where was it? Zabrak. A caramel skinned platinum haired Zabrakian girl. I'm sure Zabrakians don't canonically have hair or something, but mine does. It's my own canon. It was Sela, a caramel-skinned, platinum-haired Zabrakian girl. Who constructed Glimmer. But she certainly would not be the only one to wield it through its long and legendary life. Jenna says, look, it's your alternate universe. You get to make the rules. What are you talking about? This is all 100% canon. Doing anything Star Wars on the internet is a dangerous thing, by the way. There are defenders of its canon, and if you ever want to like meet them, go on the internet and say something wrong about it. So scene 2, which I think is the last one we'll be able to do. Scene 2, the first cut, is the deepest. This scene details the first time the weapon is used to harm another. Maybe it was on the battlefield, maybe it was a training accident, maybe it's a violent murder. This is when the danger that was always inherent became real. I'm going to roll our 3 dice to see what prompts we get off it. Okay. So, the wielder felt scared. Our first prompt, they were scared. Three, the victim felt betrayed. Oh, interesting. Now that is a prompt that I don't have time to fully explore, but that's a really interesting prompt. Optional plot hooky bits. The wielder and the victim were alone. Okay. All right. I have an idea. Sila had seen the creation of Glimmer as a ritual act, most of all. She lived in peaceful times and hadn't seen herself as the warrior she would become. When she had returned to the surface, after waiting for her leg to repair for months, she discovered that her transport had left. It was certain they would have searched for her. They were paid well by the temple on Coruscant to take her there, and would receive none of it if they hadn't returned her. They returned without her. Oh my god, everyone in the chat is getting very invested. Um, fighting fear and tears, Selah tried to repair centuries old communication towers, huddling from the frozen waste. But she simply lacked the engineering skill needed for such an undertaking. Faced with little options for reaching out, she trusted again in the Force. I mean, I guess that's the Star Wars thing to do, right? She meditated deeply and reached out into the weaves of the Force, trying to speak with anyone that may remember her. She was lucky. Her uncle was a mere system away. He hadn't been all that approving of her Jedi training, preferring more structured military experiences like his own. Jenna says, I'm going to write a strongly worded letter to people on Coruscant about their child abandonment. Abandonment of children is the least of Coruscant's problems around children. To be fair, if you were abandoned, you were the lucky one. But he had nonetheless always been good for a meal and a body story. He must have been a bit Force sensitive. Genesis, I mean, true. Since she spoke with him, she thought he might be resistant or send another from the temple in his stead. But when she explained she had built her saber he seemed excited. It was merely a day until he reached her. She was relieved to be on a ship after months being lost. I will add, though, Jenna, if you don't know, like, canonically, a lot of Jedi training ends up killing the kids. Now, I may have been misrepresented that fact, but that is my understanding of it. They do train them a lot, and they try not to let them do anything until they're ready, but they do really dangerous things eventually as a part of their trials. At the very least, they injured a lot of kids. She was relieved to be on a ship after months of being lost. Her uncle... I'm going to have to go back to the name generator just a second. Did I close it? I think I did. Why would I ever close the Star Wars name generator? It's obviously the most useful thing I've ever used on this channel. Star Wars name generator. Gar. There we go. Was not as gregarious as she expected. He was distant, cold, and she caught him watching her with suspicious glances while they traveled back to Coruscant. Jenna says, you know what? That never actually clicked for me, probably because I got really into Star Wars at 10 and then promptly got taken over by anime. They make Star Wars anime now. Or basically, they make Star Wars anime now. It's called... Oh, it's on Disney Plus. I can't think of what it's called. It's little shorts, but a lot of them are from Japanese studios, as I understand it. It's one of the few I haven't watched. I haven't really watched any of the animated Star Wars stuff. But I will say, by the way, if you are not necessarily a huge Star Wars fan, but you do kind of like the world, Andor is amazing. It's written by the guy who wrote Born Identity, the movie, not the book. And it has that like tight, there's like no force in it. There's no lightsabers. So if you're into that, it comes across as dull or whatever. But what it is like really tense spy stuff. And it's done very well in a surprisingly grounded way with really rich characterization. I highly recommend it. For me personally, it's my favorite thing to ever come out of Star Wars. She caught him watching her with suspicious glances while they traveled back to Coruscant. When the planet came into view, she was surprised to see large ships, large warships surrounding it. She asked her uncle why there were so many ships around Coruscant. He looked at her darkly and said, because your Jedi friends are all traitors. I can see they brainwashed you too. I'm turning you in for your own good. Cooperate, or they will be forced to kill you like the rest. For those who are not familiar with Star Wars lore, the most important thing in the mainline movies is called Order 66, which was this order where a bunch of brainwashed, well, not brainwashed, they're clones that basically don't have their own. Like, it's complicated. Let's not get into that. They gave an order where a bunch of people, the soldiers that were owned by the Empire, just killed every Jedi, or tried to. And there's a few that get away. I mean, like Yoda and Obi-Wan and, so on. But yeah, so my conceit here is that Order 66 happened while she was lost. And her father is a little fashy bastard. Or her uncle, rather, who thinks he's doing the right thing. Instinctively, Sila drew out her blade and backed away. The hull. The hull? No. The pilot's area. What the hell's it called? Why can't I think of the name? Jenna says, well, gotta bash the fash. Yes. It's one of my favorite aspects of Star Wars is that they just straight up kill fascists. Cockpit. My God. The cockpit filled with the brilliant pink light and melodious hum of glimmer. Gar grimaced at her and said, "Never thought I'd see my own blood be a traitor to the Empire." He lunged for her, and with tears in her eyes, she shoved him back with an open palm and the Force. He stumbled and snarled. Uncle Gar. Chat's getting real heated about this. Sela said with a trembling voice. I'm going to get in the escape pod. And you're not going to follow me. Okay? But Gar was... well... was only more convinced that there was a traitor in his midst, and lunged again. With a whiff of smoke and a terrible sizzle. Scylla cut him down. His body lay at either side of her saber. Now melting into the grate of the floor. Before she could even process or before she could even contemplate her terrible acts, the radio crackled to life. It was the barricading ship. It was insisting that the pilot give codes or prepare to be boarded. Scylla knew nothing of such things. And, well, in no way a pilot. She slammed the ship into hyperdrive. She didn't even know how to plot a course, though. The tunnel of light before her broke up into stars as an asteroid field Jenna says, girl, it's lie out your butt o'clock. Broke up into stars as an asteroid field ripped the wing of her uncle's ship clean off. She spun so fast and so long, the blood ran clean from her head, and she blacked out. It was the burns on her arm that awoke her. The ship was a smoking wreck of blinking warning lights. Nothing was where it should be. She stumbled from the ship's wreckage out into a strange planet, pocked with grim sloughs of tar and toxins. Is that how you spell sloughs? I think we're out of time. There we go. We got the first two down. Okay, let's go back and see what we made. Ooh. I do enjoy writing, but I do try to keep these to an hour. Because, to be clear, if people are like, what possibly restricts you to an hour? Well, there's two things. One is on a live level. Going 6:30 to 7:30 is about when people eat dinner. But when you start pushing past 7:30, like, you're getting into the range of, like, people are going to move on, right? The other thing is, when people are seeing these on YouTube, under an hour is more likely to bring someone in than something that's like 2 hours. Okay. If you are fast forwarding to this section of the video, it's because you just want to know what we came up with. We started playing a game called Sword Saga, which, by the way, if you want to buy, it's in a pinned comment below. It's a one-player storytelling game. I called it a tabletop RPG. It's not technically an RPG because it's mostly about the history of a blade from its creation to its destruction. It's a 6-part game. We got through the first 2 parts. The first part is how it got made. The second part is the first time it kills. In each part, we rolled a d6 from these random prompts, and we worked those prompts into our story, and I will now read you what we came up with. Being May the 4th, and May the 4th be with you, we decided to go with a Star Wars-themed blade to make a Legendary Lightsaber. It's loosely based on as much canon as I can remember, but obviously it's not truly canonical because Star Wars canon's a hard thing to wrap your head around. Part 1, our prompts we got was it needs to be a large, heavy weapon. Heavy, how heavy can a lightsaber be? But large anyways. A child, the character who makes it is a child, and it is made to train them for future danger. We sort of bent that idea around a bit. And that there is a prophecy about this weapon. Let me get back to, there's another song I like better. Here we go. Scylla Blaze swept the frosting sweat from her brow and squinted back down the ice wall she had just traversed. It was a treacherous climb, but it was made nearly impossible by the sharp gales of icy wind. Her training on Coruscant was rigorous, but never in such terrible weather. Nothing prepared her for that. She shook off a shiver and pulled her pale white hair back over her horns. She was young, so they were mere nubs, but they picked up on the chill like biting into ice. She rubbed her temples to help the headache it brought. She was unprepared for the cave ahead as well. Her training would easily surmount the trials that protected the Kyberian seams down low in the caverns, but the beauty and the scope of a temple so powerful in the Force overwhelmed her and distracted her. She failed to notice the door in front of her at least once and bounced her face off the ancient steel portal. She slipped down a whole flight of stairs carved from the marble and granite stones not long after that door. But finally she was just too enraptured by the arcing carved stone of the old Jedi temple that stood guard over the Kyberian seam. So distracted, she didn't notice something else. And it was perhaps the doing of the Force itself, so rich in that building, that she failed to notice her step off an edge, a cliff, and fell for what felt like an eternity. She fell well past the curated path set up by the old masters who had built this temple. She cried out in panic as she fell into the dark, ever further and ever faster. Whatever ledge she hit now, she knew would surely kill her, but she recalled her training, stayed her screams, and focused her trust in the Force. The wall, so strongly woven with the presence of the Force by way of its rich seams of Kyber crystals, drew her in until her trembling hand ran down the stone. She was falling so fast into the dark, but when she focused her mind on the wind and the stone, stitched as it were to her by the Force, she suddenly slowed, coming to a harsh but survivable stop on a ledge somewhere deep below the planet crust. Her leg was surely broken on the impact, yet she still felt relief to even be alive. The Force had given her a second chance, but Scylla passed out in the shock. When she awoke, she heard a voice in the dark, a chorus really, that said, "Scylla, by your works will this blade be true. Turn the tars to groves, and by 12 tribes make one, should it find the Viridian stone." She startled awake and saw before her the largest kyber crystal she'd ever seen. Pale and colorless, big as her palm, she knew that the voice must have come from it. She rested her hand upon it and was filled with a warmth that turned the crystal vibrant pink. With this crystal, in the time she spent healing her leg and surviving on the plants and waters of that strange deep place, she built Glimmer, a broad and fierce lightsaber that matched her in height and could only be controlled by a 2-hand grip. It was said it hummed so beautifully one would mistake it for the Alderaan Royal Choir. It was Scylla, a caramel-skinned, platinum-haired Zabrakian girl who constructed Glimmer, but she certainly would not be the only one to wield it through its long and legendary life. Scylla had seen the creation of Glimmer originally as a ritual act most of all. For she lived in peaceful times. This is the second part, and in the second part, I'm not going to give the prompts, it gives away the story. For she lived in peaceful times and hadn't seen herself as the warrior she would have to become. When she had finally returned to the surface, after waiting for her leg to repair for months, she discovered that her transport had left, unsurprisingly. It was certain that they had searched for her. They were paid well by the Temple of Coruscant to take her there and would receive none of that pay should they return without her. But no one could have found her that deep down anyways. But that left her alone on a cold and barren planet. Fighting fear and tears, Scylla tried to repair a centuries-old communication tower, probably used by the masters that built this place, but it exceeded her engineering skills and tools needed for such a dramatic overhaul. Faced with few options for reaching out for help, she trusted again in the Force. She meditated deeply and reached out into the weaves of the Force, trying to speak with anyone that may remember her. She was lucky. Her uncle was a mere system away. He hadn't been all that approving of her Jedi training, preferring more structured military experiences like his own, but he had nonetheless always been good for a meal and a body story. And he must have been a bit Force-sensitive since she spoke with him through the Force. She thought he might be resistant to picking her up or send another from the temple in his stead, but when she explained that she had built her saber, he seemed almost excited by that. It was merely a day until he reached her. She was relieved to be on a ship after months of being lost in the caverns of the Kyber crystals. Her uncle Gar was not as gregarious as she expected, though. In fact, he was distant, cold. She caught him watching her with suspicious glances while they traveled back to Coruscant. When the planet came into view, she was surprised to see the normally peaceful place was surrounded by large warships. She asked her uncle why there were so many ships around Coruscant, and he looked at her darkly and said, "Because your Jedi friends are all traitors, and I can see they brainwashed you too. So I'm turning you in for your own good. Now you cooperate or they will be forced to kill you like the rest." Instinctively, Scylla drew out her blade and backed away. She wasn't sure what happened, but it was bad. The cockpit filled with brilliant pink light and melodious hum of Glimmer, her great lightsaber. Gar grimaced at her and said, "Never thought I'd see my own blood be a traitor to the Empire." He lunged for her, and with tears in her eyes, she shoved him back with an open palm in the Force. He stumbled and snarled. I guess that's all I wrote. "Uncle Gar," Sayla said with a trembling voice, I'm gonna get in the escape pod, and you're not gonna follow me, okay?" But Gar was only more convinced that there was a traitor in his midst, for her Jedi mind trick was simply too weak, and lunged again. Well, with a whiff of smoke and a terrible sizzle, Sayla cut him down. His body lay at either side of her saber, now melting into the grate of the floor where it landed. Before she could even contemplate her terrible act, or the loss of her beloved uncle, the radio of the ship crackled to life. It was the barricading ship. It was the barricading ship calling in. They were insisting that the pilot give codes or prepare to be boarded. Sayla knew nothing of such codes, and well, in no way a pilot, she knew enough to slam the ship into hyperdrive, but she didn't know enough to plot a course for it. The tunnel of light, it did stretch before her for a moment, enough to get away, but it quickly broke up back into stars as an asteroid field ripped past her and smashed the wing of her uncle's ship clean off. It spun her so fast and so long that the blood ran clean from her head and she blacked out. It was the burns on her arm that awoke her. The ship was a smoking wreck of blinking warning lights. Nothing was where it should be. So she stumbled from the ship's wreckage out into a strange planet pocked with grim sloughs of tar and toxins. By the way, that ending is a reference to the prophecy. For anyone who didn't pick up on the double tar reference. Okay. Well, I mean, that was fun. I really liked the recommendations you guys had. I know there was less of them, but they were actually quite fruitful. They gave me lots of ideas. You know, the worry about doing fanfic for things like Star Wars is like, beyond like people being very judgy about it and defensive, coming across as a little bit tired and like just sort of like Luke Skywalker by another name or something like that, like being a little too tropey. Because if you're not tropey at all, then it doesn't feel like Star Wars. But if you're too tropey, then it just feels like something you've already seen. So I think me and chat, we struck a good balance here. Had a lot of fun with it. All right. Well, I cannot believe that this is the third show I've done like an hour and a half on. Jenna, it was lovely to see you. GS, I really liked your recommendations, even the ones I didn't end up using. I see that we're talking about what a Star Wars hot chocolate is, and GS recommends a hot Bjark cream. Sounds about right. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming along for our May the 4th stream. I had a lot of fun with it. Again, if you want to try this game for yourself, it's like $2 on itch.io. And if you just enjoy writing or stories, old folklore or writing along like this, then consider subscribing and liking the video. Liking really helps. And yeah, thank you so much for everybody who watches this later or something. Call you the VOD squad. I mean, that's not my own invention, but the video on demand squad. Thank you so much for watching later. And I've been Rory. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Get out of my ship.